Okay. Yeah. Okay. So my area of research is something that is uh, at the intersection of three different things. So I want to take time to explain what I do and what my research interests are. So you can see there are three thrust areas. So one is dynamical systems and control. The second one is AI, artificial intelligence, and then computational neuroscience. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with dynamical systems or heard of this general term, dynamical systems. So if you are not heard of, or if you are not familiar with it, so just think of this as any system that evolves over time, that has some variables associated with it, and those variables change over time due to an external influence or due to the internal processes or mechanisms that affect this evolution. So, okay, so this is a bit abstract. So let's take examples. So we have robots, cars. These are the most basic examples that you would hear when someone talks about dynamical systems. So these are systems that are governed by laws of physics. So if you push a robot, it will be governed how this robot moves, where it lands. All these things are governed by laws of physics. So they evolve dynamically, and it doesn't stop here. So you can take it to systems like neural systems. So your brain, what you think, how you process information, how your sensory organs process all the inputs or stimuli that they receive. All these are happening through a dynamic process. So there is a mechanism that governs how these signals are processed, how these signals are handled, the way they are received, and how outputs or outcomes are generated, how these signals affect the evolution of the system. So these things are studied as dynamical systems. So it goes all the way from engineering systems like robotic systems to naturally occurring systems like neurons, cellular mechanisms, anything that has to do with dynamicity, change over time, right? So the field of dynamical systems and control basically tries to understand and model these systems and try to see if we can regulate or influence if there is a chance to do that, all right? So that is a branch of applied mathematics, the dynamic systems and control theory. And that is one of my major areas of research. The second one is AI. So I'm sure many of you have heard or are working on AI. So I want to give you a broad description of what I think as AI. So AI is something that covers things starting from what we commonly see as deep networks or deep learning, all the way to how the information is represented and accessed and used, and how this information facilitates decision making, or how it is interpreted so that you can gain some insights into the mechanisms that generate data. All right. So AI is a very broad and all-encompassing terminology. It is used or thrown around in different contexts, but if you look at concrete definitions of AI, it includes things from representation learning to rule-based systems to knowledge structures and all the things in between. So most of my research within this is particularly narrow and restricted to how we can do computations efficiently, and how we can be how we can take inspiration from some of the naturally occurring computational process, like how neurons process information efficiently, how we can take that inspiration and develop algorithms that we can run on our computers efficiently. So that is one. Second, how we can design neural architectures, computational architectures that can perform tasks that are seemingly complex, but has some meaningful utility for interpreting data. And there is a separate learning paradigm within all these AI modules that is called reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning essentially concerns with systems, specifically dynamical systems, and how we can affect the evolution of these systems by looking at some of the incentive mechanisms that the system offers us. So that is essentially what reinforcement learning paradigm does. So you have something as a process that is evolving, and the goal of reinforcement learning based decision making is you influence this process and receive some feedback from this process about what your influence does, and use that feedback to refine how you influence this process until you get a desired outcome out of this process. So, all right, so these are my focus areas. So, and the last thing that I have is computational neuroscience. And again, it is interconnected with both dynamical systems and AI, because most of the neural mechanisms, they are hierarchical dynamical systems. So you have dynamical processes all the way from how cells or the individual neurons communicate with each other, all the way to how neural circuits and brain regions communicate with each other, right? So these are dynamical systems, and these have helped us build some of the modern deep neural networks that are used in AI. So really all these areas are having overlapping interests and benefits of going with each other. So that is where I try to focus my research at. So that is broadly the research thrust. So I will talk a little bit more about application. So going from abstract to something very application based. So we have some of these applications that are engineered systems. So you have smart grids, wireless sensor networks, distribution networks, transportation networks. So these are systems that we have created, we have made, right? So there are a lot of things that affect how these systems function. So one of the application that I focus on is how to make these systems more efficient, in the sense that they don't consume a lot of energy, they don't communicate a lot with each other, so that it can be redundant and time consuming. And how do we ensure that these systems are secure? So one of the things that is very important is that all these systems that I have, at least on the slide, are infrastructure systems. So they affect a lot of things. So if these systems can be hacked or taken over by an adversary, they can really make a huge impact on a lot of things. So how do we secure this system is one of the important questions that we are currently looking at in our research group. All right, so those are the tasks. So we want to ensure that these systems operate efficiently and do what we want in a way that is more secure to external adversaries. All right. So the second type of applications that we are interested is in naturally occurring processes. So on this slide, you will see some examples of processes that are not designed or engineered by us. These are processes that exist in nature. So you have social networks that are, okay, so when I say social network, don't restrict yourselves to thinking social media networks. Social network is just any connection of or any interaction between individuals is a social interaction. So any network that forms through interaction between individuals, we can term them or define them as social networks. So understanding how these networks evolve, how opinions are formed, how clusters or cognitive clusters are generated in these opinion networks when topics or interactions happen on certain topics. These are things that we look at. And again, just to re-emphasize, these are systems that are dynamic in nature. So all the things that are associated with the system, they evolve over time, and therefore they are a very interesting topic to look at. The other systems that I have on this slide are also very interesting. So you have these mechanisms of drug delivery. I don't know if you have heard of how insulin is administered nowadays. So there are these automated insulin vending syringes or systems that keep track of time, keep track of some of the variables of interest, and just administer insulins at appropriate times to ensure that the blood glucose levels are within nominal range, right? So if you think about it, so this entire mechanism is a feedback system, and this system is dynamic because a lot of things is in this system is affected by variable factors that are not directly affected by what happens within the system. For example, the amount of food you take, the type of food you take, when you take it, all these factors vary a lot, and it varies across individuals. So accounting for all these factors and effectively coming up with a strategy to administer all the medication that you need at the right time to keep you healthy is a very challenging task, right? So again, so this is an important application to think about if you are looking at how we can make use of AI or dynamical systems function, or how we can affect how these systems function, right? And then we have a lot of these other systems like epidemic networks, neural networks, cellular mechanisms. All these are systems that exist. And for many of these systems, we don't know how these systems function or why it functions a specific way, right? So one of the problems in this set of applications that is of interest to us is how do we model these systems? How do we model these systems to an extent where we can understand or gain insights out of these models, right? So this is an important question that we look at in our group. And this one is a little cutting edge in the sense of systems that exist today. So you have a lot of these systems that are called population systems. So these can be engineered as well as naturally occurring systems. So imagine collection of systems that evolve together as a group, right? So for example, I don't know how many of you have gone or looked at MRI machine. I don't have anyone know how a MRI machine works? Yes. All right. So a simplest or a very crude description of how it works is you place a water molecule, you place an object that you want to analyze using NMR spectroscopy or magnetic resonance imaging, and a magnetic pulse is applied through this, and all the water molecules are polarized, and this polarization results in alignment of all these molecules. So imagine there are hundreds of thousands of small balls, these stress balls that you are familiar with in this room, and they are all oriented in different random directions. And when a magnetic pulse is applied, all these balls reorient themselves in a particular way, right? This reorientation results in changing or emission of energy, and this energy is recorded, and that is used to analyze what's in this object that you are analyzing, right? So now influencing or polarizing these molecules simultaneously is a problem called a quantum control problem. So it is one type of quantum control problem where you have, I don't know again if you are familiar with this number called Avogadro number. Have you heard of this? So it is a number that says how many molecules are present in an atom or something like that. So so it is of the order of 10 power 23. So imagine there are 10 power 23 balls and you want to influence all of them simultaneously using a single pulse, right? So this is a problem of controlling a population of dynamical units, right? So it comes under this population systems or ensemble control problem. And similarly, you have this problem of deep brain stimulation. You might have heard about it. So electrodes are placed in brain and electrical pulses are injected, and the commonality between what we heard of this quantum control and this deep brain stimulation is this single electric pulse, it influences hundreds of thousands of neurons in the region where this electrode is injected, right? It influences it simultaneously. So how do we affect the activity of this region in a specific way using a specific electric pulse is something that we don't know. And understanding that is a problem that comes under this ensemble control problem. All right. Now, the last thing that I want to mention, broadly speaking, is okay, so we have all these sensors that are used or placed in almost everything that we touch. Now, how we can use this data and either organize them or analyze them or pre-process them, do something in such a way that this raw data is converted to something that is actionable, right? So that is a big challenge because you have sensors everywhere now. And there is no problem with collecting data. So you have lots and lots of data. Now, how do we convert this raw data to something that is actionable? And that is a big challenge. And what we do is try to develop or build tools that incorporates neural networks and things related commonly with ML and try to gain some insights out of raw data. And we do that particularly in the context of dynamical systems because these systems, they generate data over time and you cannot ignore data at any time instant unless you are aware of what to ignore and what not to, right? So it is very important challenge that we have as current project. Okay, now I broadly explained all the things that we are interested in. Now I want to spend some time explaining or describing the current projects that we are actively working on through with some active collaboration with other team members and active funding. So this one is a project that is funded by Navy, and the topic of my seminar talk today is AI in collaborative autonomy. So I'm really getting into that only from this slide. Now, when I say collaborative autonomy, anyone knows what that means? Anyone wants to make a guess? Yeah.
So where a lot of AI models work together.
Okay. Anyone? Yeah.
So it's reports that together to do tasks.
Good.
Similarly, system of multiple modules or AI models that are working independently autonomously.
Okay. Any other guesses?
So I think marrying two ideas basically, like from an AI perspective and from a Navy perspective, they are a subject matter expert and AI is giving you the technical thing. So getting married together and then that gives you the autonomous decision-making process when there is uncertainty or something.
Okay, so I think everyone touched upon all the right things, but I want to take it one step further abstract. On an abstract level, autonomy is the ability to self-govern or take actions without depending on others. Collaborative autonomy is retaining this autonomy while cooperating and collaborating with other such entities. And these need not be restricted only to AI models, right? So, for this particular project, so we are only looking at a specific type of systems, which is collaboration between ground rovers or ground robots and drones. So you have these ground robots that are capable of doing things on their own, exploring their environment, trying to get to point A from point B, or delivering some load or retrieving something. And there is also these collaborative or autonomous drones, which can also do these things independently. They are not affected by how the ground robots work, or they don't have any issue with what is happening on the ground. So both these systems, they are equipped with autonomous decision-making agents, and there are tasks which require them to collaborate with each other. And the reason why they need not be fully collaborative is that they have to be robust. So for example, if you are searching or doing reconnaissance in a fire affected area, right? Now there is a possibility that your ground rover may get stuck in some place. And because your drone is dependent on your ground rover, you should not lose your drone, right? So it is really about robustness, how we can make these autonomous agents independent while they collaborate with each other, so that they can do tasks more effectively, right? So that is the whole idea. But the specific challenges with this type of tasks is mainly about communication, right? So if you have multiple entities that are working or operating in some environment which is uncertain or potentially dangerous, they have to communicate with each other. And how we can ensure that this communication is private, right? So if you are already working in an adversarial environment or a dangerous environment, how do we preserve the privacy of communication? How do we ensure that there is minimal amount of communication so that there is less opportunity for this communication to be overheard by adversaries? So all these are questions that we are exploring in this particular project. So how we can manage if some of the drones don't stop communicating? It could be due to various factors, but how do we handle that loss of agents? These are questions that we look at in this project of NAHA. All right. Now, this is a different context. So this is a different project. So the first one was a project with Navy. So this one is a project with the Air Force. And this project also talks about collaborative autonomy. And here, what we are really looking at is collaboration between humans and autonomous agents. So I don't know how many of you have used, or I mean, most of you would have used this autopilots or lane keeping assistants in your car. I don't know. If you have used it, you might have noticed that if you switch on autopilot or if you switch on lane keeping assistant, your car will alert you every 30 seconds or a minute, depending on how the setting is, right? It doesn't want to completely be autonomous. And that is because it knows that there is a human and these software can make mistakes. So there is some dependency here. Now, if you really think about it, the way the collaboration happens in this setting is really a hard switch. So at a given time, either the autonomous software is fully in control or the human has to be fully in control. The collaboration is really binary here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this project essentially looks at how we can make this collaboration seamless, right? So if, for example, a human operator is operating a drone, he is effecting or he or she is effecting the drone to do a specific navigation. The software component is supposed to just observe it and compensate if there is a lack of actuation. Does that make sense? Right. So that is really what we are looking at here. And this problem is okay. Another thing that I want to convey clearly is in this one, on the previous slide, and really in the seminar topic, I say AI enabled or AI based. So why should AI be there? Right. So that's a important question. So if we don't need AI, why do we have to force fit it? So there are some problems which are mathematically ill-posed. I don't know how many of you have heard this term, ill-posed problem. So the simplest analogy is most of you have solved AX equal to B, right? This simple linear algebra problem, AX equal to B. And there is certain type of equations for which solutions exist. And these are called well-posed problems. And there are certain equations for which the solution doesn't exist. And these are inconsistent system of equations, and these problems are ill-posed. So what really it means is you cannot find an exact solution. All you can do is get as close to a good solution as possible, right? So for these types of problems, you don't have a predefined or well-constructed algorithm that finds a solution exactly. So all you can do is get data, try to refine your solution as much as possible until you hit a point where the solution is good enough. And this refining process is where the AI and learning comes in, right? So you really use data, you try to start with an initial guess that offers you some form of solution, and then just refine it on the fly. So that is where all learning enabled and AI enabled comes in, right? So the goal is, how do we seamlessly make human operators collaborate with AI softwares or the autonomous softwares in the system? And how do we make it seamless using the data that is generated in real time? Right. So this is the main objective or goal of this project. The second and third aims you see are really important, because if you are dependent on data to refine your solutions, you want to ensure that your data is consistent. You don't lose data due to some sensor malfunction, or if you are having maintenance in a particular location because of which your sensors are turned off, you don't get full data. Now, how do we refine my solutions with incomplete data? Again, that is a challenging problem, and that is one of the goals of our project is, how do we handle this using AI solutions? So how do we handle missing data? How do we compensate for missing data without losing interpretability of the feedback that we get? And the last one, which is also related to safety and security, is, okay, so I am taking most of the decisions using data. Now, what if someone who wants to mess with me adds some noise to the data, or changes the data, or does something as a result of which I don't get the correct data? Now, I should have some mechanism to flag data points and say, okay, I can use this data because it has some information useful to me, so I can use it to refine my solution, or I should drop this data. I should not use this data, and I don't even have to store this data, right? So that is a decision that the software component should make while dealing with data, especially if there are applications where data streams give you high dimensional data. Storing them itself is a big challenge in edge devices, right? So you want to really be flexible, in the sense, make decision about the quality of data, right? Whether this data is going to be useful for me or not. So making that decision is an important challenge, again, in this domain of collaborative autonomy, right? So that is another thing that we are looking at in this particular setup. Okay, so now this is another one that is possibly interesting for you all. So this is a project called Information Competition Simulator. So the goal of this project is to construct a simulator or a software where you can assign bunch of individuals or software agents to inject information and try to influence the opinion of the group of uh, nodes or individuals in that simulation or software, right? So the idea is you have a digital version of a social network that is created in your system or laptop. All you are trying to do is understand if I inject information through a particular node, how this information propagates or disseminates across the population, what insight I can gain from this. Is there a way to understand how narratives work, how misinformation or disinformation can be mitigated? All these things are the goals of this project. So our idea is to set up this test bed or experimental test bed where we can try to understand how information spread happens in a network and how we can understand particularly spread of misinformation and narratives. So that is really the goal of this particular project. All right, and I think this is the last one, if I'm not wrong. So this is a project that is uh, funded by NSF, and I'm working with my collaborators. One of them is Dr. Amit, who is handling this course. So this project is about, again, collaborative autonomy, if you can see it that way. So you have a lot of AI agents, which in this particular case is equivalent to a chat bot, and you have human users who are going to use this chatbot. Now, the main idea or the goal of this project is how do we ensure that there is safety in how these two groups of agents interact with each other. So how the chatbot can be designed independently of how which human user uses. So there can be hundreds of millions of users using a particular chatbot, each with different ways to ask a question or get information out of a chatbot, right? So without relying on how a person may ask a question, how I can design this autonomy of the chatbot, and how I can make it collaborate with the individual user who is going to interact with the chatbot, right? Now, how do we make this conversation safe in the context of a specific application like health? Now, if you have users who are talking to a chatbot and interacting with the chatbot, asking questions about health, or particularly in this context, mental health. So how do we design this chatbot so that it doesn't tell something that is harmful, that doesn't shut itself off without conveying useful information as needed? How do you strike a balance? So that is really the goal of this particular project. Now, one of the things that you will see on the title is knowledge guided neurosymbolic AI. So if it seems a mouthful, let me break it down. So AI, as I said, it is a broad, all-encompassing thing that you can think of anything that has to do with learning or data storage and representation. They are part of AI, right? Now, neurosymbolic is a very specific term. So most of the AI that is popular, at least to an extent in recent years, have been deep neural networks or neural networks, basically. So these are models that take data, do some processing of the data, and generate some output. And this output generation is not dependent on any inbuilt representation of what the inputs mean, right? So it is just a statistical calculations of examples that this neural network has seen before during the process of training, and it mimics this processing that it has learned to generate all the outputs. it doesn't really understand what the inputs are. It doesn't generate an output based on the understanding of the input. It is all based on statistical correlations or associations that it has seen during the training process. Now, neurosymbolic is a combination of neural systems and symbolic systems. Neural systems is what I just described. It is essentially a deep neural network or a neural network. And a symbolic system is a system that tries to keep the information or the data in a more represent this data in a more meaningful way. So in the context of, for example, text data, so usually we keep the textual information as symbolic information, and it is organized in some way, most commonly in the form of graph structures. And we try to use this information together with the neural network and see if we can combine the best of both worlds, right? So that is really what neurosymbolic AI field is about. And at least for this project, that's what we are trying to look at. So we are trying to see how we can integrate this abstract, meaningful information of inputs together with the processing powers of deep neural networks and build this chatbot that can be autonomous as well as collaborate with whoever is using it, right? So that it is being useful.
Yes, one question.
Sure.
Sorry. So I understand that these two agents can operate autonomously, but where does the collaborative autonomy comes in the picture? That piece particularly because
Yes.
we're talking about AI safety. And AI safety is such a governance framework that runs with it. And kind of maybe we cannot call it as a rule-based probably, but it can just pass through that layer so that it can filter out or it can have that rules to make sure that it filters out. But when does it collaborative in nature comes in?
That's a good question. So at least for this project, I don't know if this collaboration, if it is clear or not. So let me try to explain this. So we are clear that we are trying to build a chatbot, right? Chatbots are autonomous software agents, right? Now we want them to be autonomous because we don't want the chatbot to generalize across the users, right? So I don't want the chatbot to repeat what it is repeating to me, you, or anyone else, right? It should be more personalized interaction. So I cannot build a chatbot that doesn't take into account the specific individualized query or context. Now, that makes the chatbot autonomous. So it doesn't depend on the influence of how the others interact with it. It is having its own rules. It is governed by its own mechanisms, and this interaction should be made safe. So that is where this chatbot is autonomous. Now, where does this collaboration comes, right? The collaboration comes in this particular context with how human users interact with it. Now, here, the human users are also autonomous because they don't really actually read what are the safe things to ask the chatbot. How do we interact with the chatbot? Is there the best way to operate or query the chatbot? Typically, these are chatbots that are facing users who want to just interact as if they are interacting with anybody else, right? So they are autonomous in that sense. Does that make sense? So you have two autonomous agents, at least in this particular context, and they are actually trying to get some information that is meaningful for each other. From a chatbot's perspective, it is trying to fully understand what the query is. And from the user's perspective, the user is trying to get the information that they want from the chatbot. Does that make sense? Now there is exchange of information between each other. If the chatbot doesn't understand what the query is clearly, ideally, the chatbot is supposed to follow up with a particular question that can help inform the chatbot to give the right information. Does that make sense? So that is the context in which I talk about collaboration. So there is collaboration, but the collaboration is not as explicit as you saw in the robotic sense, right?
Relating to it.
Right. So, but
It's an intra, right? It's not inter.
it is inter, right? So
Between the two agents.
yeah, so it is between humans and the chatbot. So the users who are using this chatbot, they want to get something useful out of it, and they can act independently. And the chatbot is supposed to be designed so that it is acting independently, and it is not generalizing among the agents that it will interact with. And they try to understand each other in some sense, so that they get mutual beneficial information extracted out of each other. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just to follow on to that, then is there reinforcement going on the chatbot side? Is it actually benefiting by successful interaction or collaboration can reinforce its rules or?
That's a very good question. Yes. So at least for this project, we have this particular thing, which is the step of feedback, right? So what we propose to do here is that we let these chatbots interact with experts, and we seek feedback from these experts, asking whether the output or the information provided by the chatbot is meaningful, safe, and so on. And based on this feedback, this chatbot updates itself. Right? So that is the refinement aspect of it.
It's a related question, but after the reinforcement learning is done, after we have feedback from the domain experts and the model is now ready for deployment, the collaboration only happens ad hoc in real time.
Yes.
right? But the model no longer learns anything to improve its performance
That is
from the
true.
user,
Yes.
right? Is that the same case for all of the previous
Yes,
examples also?
Exactly. So let me make so the premise of all these projects is you want to build systems that can autonomously function while collaborating with each other, right? And let's say there is an ideal solution to build such system for each application, right? Now, this ideal solution, we cannot get there in a straightforward manner, because all these solutions are ill-posed solutions to ill-posed problems. So we cannot get there directly. So we have to learn through interactions, through data. And once we learn them, we get as close to a solution that is meaningful, and we freeze the solution and deploy the system, right? So that's the context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it makes sense and it sounds good, but wouldn't it be nice if these collaborations, like through these collaborations, whether it's for chatbots, whether it's for drones and ground rovers, whether it's for robots, the autonomous systems themselves are able to learn something from the collaboration and, update themselves or improve the performance?
No, that is a good point, and it would be good if they do that. And one of the things that is challenging one of the things that is challenging is when they are deployed in an actual environment, you don't control a lot of things. So the data that the system sees as feedback may be good, may not be good, right? So as a first step, there should be a mechanism that should actually flag if the data points are good enough to be used for refinement. So that is something that we are looking at in the context of robotic system, because that is a bit more constrained system. Though there is a lot of variability, it still is governed by certain laws of physics, unlike a conversation. Okay, so conversation is not actually constrained. So there can be different variables that are involved that are hard to control, and it is hard to flag which data is useful, which is not useful. So that is a problem, that is a challenge. So again, all good questions. Anything else? All right, so hope I answered your questions well. All right, so I'll just stop with this particular slide, and this again comes back to ill-posedness. So in general, whenever you see these hierarchical systems or systems that have some form of organization or hierarchy. And the example that I give here is a neural system. So there are a lot of things that are happening at molecular or cellular level. There are a lot of things that happen at individual neuron level, neural circuit level, or brain region level. So people study this system at different levels, at different hierarchies. This is true even for systems such as batteries. So I don't know if you are exposed to battery management systems. So in many of these electric vehicles, there is a software that is technically called a battery management system. The goal of this software is to manage the battery pack and inform when the charge is low, when it should be charged, when there should be maintenance and things like that, right? Now, one of the challenging aspects of this battery management system is it is monitoring a hierarchical system. So if we think about this, there is actually some chemical process at an electrode level within an individual battery cell that is analogous to individual neuron. This battery cell is organized in battery modules, and these modules are organized as packs. Now, these are hierarchical systems. Again, what is the problem with the hierarchical system? So as we go more abstract or more higher level in the hierarchy, the measurements that we get are sparse. So if I monitor the system or the battery pack at a pack level, I cannot measure things about individual cells. Similarly, if I monitor brains using EEG, I don't know what happens at individual neuron level. If I choose to monitor things at a neuron level, I cannot simultaneously capture the information or or sense what is happening at a circuit or region level. So there is this inherent challenge when it comes to hierarchical systems, and these are systems that often are difficult to design controls and safety mechanisms for, right? So that is something that is very exciting and an important problem where AI is seen as a solution. So this fits classic definition of a ill-posed problem because you have a bunch of things that are happening. You can only monitor or measure at certain level of hierarchy, and you can actuate only at certain level of hierarchy, and you cannot influence or access information at each level simultaneously. Now, how can we bridge this gap using solutions from AI is where a lot of things are happening. If you look at any problem that are currently actively pursued through an AI solution approach, you will see the commonality that either the problem itself is imposed or the system is hierarchically organized. So anyway, so I'll stop here, and if there are any questions, I can answer them either now or if you can talk to me offline. Yeah.
This is something you said that I've heard many times, but I would like a definition.
Sure.
Is an edge devices?
Oh, okay. So edge device, there is a rigorous definition of what an edge device is. I will not get into that, but to put it simply, you have a computer that we have in our labs, right? Contrast that with a chip that is used, for example, in a remote or in a robot or in a drone or a camera. So these are chips that have limited capacity because they are constrained by the energy consumption, weight, and so on. And they cannot have a lot of things that you would expect a normal CPU or a processor that you can place it in offline in your room, right? So these are actually at the edge of application level. So they are
Is it similar to embedded?
it's essentially these are embedded systems, but embedded systems can be used more closer to where you do your software development, but this is more close to the deployment end of things. All right.
Just a comment, looking at this, like, while AI is used as a solution to solve hierarchical system problems, I've been reading a lot of research on how AI researchers are trying to go through this similar hierarchy to understand what happens within the neural network. So
Yes,
which are the neurons that are getting spiked? What is the polysemanticity of each neuron and how it's getting affected? So this hierarchy is just what we are also trying to discover with the neural networks.
correct. So think about it this way. So if you want to, actually, this is a very interesting circular problem. So you want to understand the organization of this hierarchical system, but you cannot monitor each hierarchical level simultaneously. So even to understand it, you use the AI tool to extract information out of the data that you are able to collect, right? So actually, it's a circular problem. So anyway, all right. So I think I'm over time by a few minutes. So make sure to turn in your write-up, and I will communicate with Dr. Seth about the Blackboard setup for you to submit your assignments.